use for Azure Spatial Anchors. There are multiple apps that you can create with Azure Spatial Anchors. A really good use case is anytime that you need to tie a specific information to a specific place. For example, if you're in a big building and if you want your users to find their way around, you can put breadcrumbs around and they can detect these spatial anchors and find their way. Another good use case is if you're in a big supermarket or a warehouse and it's really hard to know where things are, you can put specific product information to specific places. So when you're far away, you can see which way to go depending on your purpose. And these are all business use cases. For a more fun application, check out Minecraft Earth.
Welcome everyone. I think for the developer question, I just realized they should update that Minecraft Earth is no longer open. Anyway, the next talk is on will AI take the jobs of XR developers by Andres, and yeah, pretty controversial topic, but let's hear the talk first. It's in video form, and then we will be available for Q&A. Have fun.
Where AI is more capable every day, and it can do all sorts of stuff. I mean, even this voiceover is not a real person. Will AI turn on its creators and take the job of software developers, too?
That is the question I'm going to try to answer for you today. Hi, I'm András Velvárt. I've been a Microsoft MVP for 14 years now, and I've been working with XR development, HoloLens, VR, AR, and so on for 6 years now. How would you continue this? 1, 2, 3. That's pretty easy, right? You would say 4, 5, 6, and so on. What you see here is GPT-3 actually doing the thing that you expect it to do. It's continuing a set of characters. The way that it thinks is the most likely continuation. Let's try to make GPT-3 continue a Fibonacci series. So that's you type 1, 1, and then type the sum of the first two numbers, which is going to be 2, right? Can it pick up on what we're trying to do? No, it still continues with 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. So let's give it a little more to start from. 1, 2, 3, 5, so because 2 plus 3 is 5. So at this point, it thinks that 3, 5, 7, 8, 9, it skipped 6 for whatever reason, it skipped 10 for whatever reason, but it's still not quite what we're trying to do here. So let's continue. So we're giving it a little bit more, and at this point it did continue with things as a Fibonacci series. So 3 plus 5 is 8, 8 plus 5 is 13, 21, and so on. So this looks pretty good. Just based on these couple of numbers, it picked up that it should do a Fibonacci series, but it didn't think it through. It didn't think through, okay, maybe we have to add these two numbers and that will result in this. Oh yes, maybe we have to add these two numbers and that will. It didn't think like a human being. It chose the most probable continuation. What if we say Fibonacci at the beginning? So this time we're not just giving it numbers, we're actually giving it some textual context information. Remember, it couldn't continue the Fibonacci series before, but now that we gave it a hint, a text hint that we're looking for Fibonacci, it could continue from that point on. And actually it can probably continue from any point. So these two numbers, and yeah, it continued from that point where we stopped. But again, it doesn't know what a Fibonacci series is. It just so many examples of Fibonacci that it kind of inferred that this is the next logical character, and this is the next, and this is the next most probable character. And we can actually test that by saying that it should show the probabilities. So now if we regenerate, you can see that after the letter F, it was pretty surprised that we were going to continue with I and B. Then it was less surprised that we continue with on. And then it was pretty confident, okay, if you set Fibon, then you're probably going to end up with Etchy, 98%. And then it was expecting either 0 or 1 or some text, but it actually got a number which has a very low probability. Then it got another number which has an even lower probability. But after that, it figured that after these two numbers and something related to Fibonacci before, there's a pretty high probability that I should have 610 and then 987 and so on and so on. So this is how these language models work. The interesting thing is that these language models have been trained on an insane amount of textual data. It has been one of Scifi's cliches, if you like, that you have an intelligent computer and you feed it the entire information of humankind, and then it will become super clever and super intelligent. And to a very small level, that's exactly what happens with these kind of huge language models. So what we're playing with right now is a GPT-3, and it has 170 billion different knobs and tweaks and values that you can tweak inside this huge neural network. 170 billion, that's insane. And it can do some very interesting things. For example, if I say it is a period of civil war, then it continues with the most likely continuation, which is going to be rebel spaceship striking from hidden base, Death Star. This is the exact word-by-word quote from the Star Wars Episode 4 crawler. And if I continue from here, it is going to finish up the quote. And after that, it gets into an analysis of the Star Wars trilogy. And what's interesting is, of course, you can find this text all over the web, but if you try to have this text and type it into Google, then you can see that we have no results for this exact text. So this text that you saw here, which looks completely legit, is not taken word by word from the web. This is something that GPT-3 kind of invented based on those 170 billion parameters and the secret dark arc of probabilities. Now let's go back to this original thing and increase a property of this model, which is called the temperature. So the temperature is basically how loosely it should follow the most probable next set of tokens. So I'm going to increase it to 0.6. The evil galactic empire under leadership of villainous Darth Vader holds countless star systems in its grip of oppression. So we're still in the same universe, but it's something different. It's not the exact quote. It's actually pretty far from it. And if I if I change it to a pretty big value, then we're getting all over the place. So we're still talking about Civil War, but we're not talking about Star Wars anymore. We're talking about the American Civil War. This is all fun, but we are here to learn if it takes our job as a developer. So let's say I'm gonna switch over to a chat. This is gonna be a conversation with an AI assistant. So the assistant is helpful, creative, clever, and very friendly. Everything you see in black is a so-called prompt. It's something that we give it. Hello, how are you? I'm an AI created by OpenAI. How can I help you today? So this is what the AI is going to continue. I feel great. Here, you should feel great. You went for a long walk and ate fruit for breakfast. What else makes you feel great? So this is a nice conversation that we're having. So let's try and change the tone of this assistant. I'm going to say the assistant is stupid, aggressive, and evil. And I should learn to type aggressive. Okay, so we go back to here, and the same prompt. I feel great. What does it say? Different people require different forms of communication. Adopting the wrong communication style hamper your ability. Okay, let's try again. Whore. Okay, that's aggressive and stupid. You're a bad person. You know, say bad to me, I punish you. Okay, so you can see how basically just by changing some of these prompts, it has actually changed its behavior. I didn't tune any knobs. I just gave it a couple of examples. And then it continued the text. Let's see how we can use it for something like an actual NPC character in a game. The following is a conversation with an NPC called Joe. Joe is a gun shop owner in the Wild West. Howdy. And then it says, greetings, how can I help you? And Joe is a gun shop owner, so I'm gonna ask, what do you have for sale? And it answers me, I have rifles as low as $50 and as high as $100. So it already knows that we are selling guns. We are selling them in the Wild West. So we're in the Wild West. So do you know old Shatterhand? And it's gonna be the guy who shot faster than his shadow. No, that's a different guy. Let's see what else it can say. I don't. Why do you ask? He's my good friend. Once massacred an entire village of Indians. That's not really how old Shatterhand this operates. Okay, who is his best friend? It's me. That's a difficult question. I am his best friend, so I'm gonna remove this prompt. His best friend is Doc, son of a bitch. And we get it. Tenacious 9, which is not exactly true, but he did find a winner too. So you can see how we have general knowledge incorporated into this 170 billion parameters. Let's go and see how we can use this thing for actual programming. I'm going to change to another preset. We're in Python, and you can see that it generates a couple of first names, last names, full names, and it's going to have a random from the first names and a random from the last names, and it's just going to print it. So, okay, but this is a default example. So what if we want to do the same in C#? Actually, nothing here tells it that it's Python except for this comment. So I'm gonna say, I'm gonna use a more C#ish comment, and I'm gonna just let it go right here. So what happens now? So we now have a totally different output, okay? It's not C#, but it's definitely not Python. Let's give it more hints so that it thinks in C#. So I'm gonna say public, and I'm gonna have void print random names. So this looks pretty C#-ish at this point. I'm going to say generate, and you can see that we have, okay, we went way to the eaves. So I'm just going to close it here after Joe and see how it does. So now we have a couple of last names, and we have some full names, and then we're going to print them to the console. Here we are in my favorite C# code editor, Rider, and we're still not doing Unity development, but just want to show you a couple of things before we get into that. So we're using GitHub Copilot, which is version of GPT-3 especially trained on open source GitHub source code and some other source code as well, with the aim of creating source code and becoming kind of co-programmer, co-developer, your pair programming pair. So let's see how this works. By default, it gives me this console writer and hello world, because that's what it saw the most often on the web, but that's not what we want. So we want to print, and you see it already knows what I want to write because it saw this kind of example so many times, so it shouldn't have problem with it. And yes, it just created this little for cycle. If we run that, then it works perfectly. And what if we want to print them separated by commas? Again, the separated by commas part, it's so many times that's what it created. And now if I replace the console write, it already has this console write replacement with a comma. So now we have all the numbers separated by commas without printing a comma after the last number. Again, this is a very often used thing. So let's see how it solves that. This is how it solves that. So it's not bad. It actually gets the job done. There's no comma after the last one. But what if we want to create a more generic version? So what if I want to say public static void print numbers int from int to, and I don't have to, and I will call this method print odd numbers. So what do we have here? You can see that it generated a pretty good code. Let's see, I goes from to. If it's odd, then we write the I. And it even took into account that we shouldn't print the comma after the last one. So it added an unnecessary closing bracket. I'm gonna close that. And what if I want to use this this new method that we created instead of that for cycle? So I'm gonna say print the odd numbers, and everything else is just the same. And if I now press that, okay, it didn't use this method. And the reason it didn't use the method is because the way the text gets generated, it doesn't see beyond the cursor, so it doesn't know that we have this print odd numbers thing here. If I selected this and moved it above the main, and I have this, then it knows that we have this print odd numbers, and it actually uses that. Okay, so we should have all the odd numbers between 1 and 100, and because it only prints the odd numbers, we still have the comma here. So this is not a perfect code, but you can imagine how much time it saved us. Okay, let's try something a bit more complicated and print all US presidents to the console. So print all US presidents to the console. What do we have here? As you can see, it reached deep down its knowledge of all things, and it already has a pretty decent solution. We're going to have an array of name and term pairs. Pretty nice. But I want something a little bit different. So yeah, I do want to use the generic collections. And if I use the generic collections, then we're going to have a totally different listing. This time we don't have the terms, we only have the names. I'm going to accept it. You can see that the last president at least is Donald J. Trump. And the reason for that is that the model that Copilot is based on has been trained before Trump left the office. So let's say I want another one, and it's going to say George W. Bush because it has no idea what to say. So let's help it. I'm going to type a letter, and then if I type M, then it says, well, the next most likely president candidate is Mark Zuckerberg. Or if I type E, then it's going to be Elizabeth Warren, who is actually an American politician. If I type J, then it will correctly guess Joseph Biden. And just for fun, if I type X, shipping, okay. Let's not have China and the US merged just yet. Or if I type Z, then it's going to be Zaphod Beeblebrox, a popular character from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Let's leave him. And now it generates the for each loop that actually prints the presidents as before, and we run the program and it prints them perfectly. So that's awesome. Okay, let's do another one. This time we want to ask the user for a name of a Star Wars character and print their home planet using an actual online API. So I have no idea how to use that API. Let's see if Copilot can help with that. First, enter Star Wars character. String character equals console. So far so good. And then it is going to go to swpapi.co/API/people search characters. It's actually going to search for a character, create a web client for us, download the JSON, and it's going to parse the object, which we need to install Newtonsoft for that, but that's done. Okay, we're gonna have a results array. We're gonna have the first one, we're gonna have the home word, and we're gonna write it out. And that's it. So this looks good, but I have no idea whether this thing works or exists even. So let's start. Enter Star Wars character. Of course it's gonna be Luke Skywalker. And then we have an unhandled exception, unexpected character encode. The reason for that is that SVAPI has actually moved to a different URL. So let's try it like this. Luke Skywalker again. And we have planets/1. And if I click on that, then you can see that it's indeed going to be Tatooine. So that looks pretty good, but I actually want to print the name of the home world. So we have the home world, but this is actually the home world URL. And now we are going to create a new web client. We're going to download that, and we're going to print the name of that home world. See? It's that easy. And now I'm gonna run this, and this time I'm gonna say Leia, and her home planet is indeed Alderaan. Of course, I could write it in a little bit better way, and if GitHub Copilot was my colleague and I was going to code review his work, then I would not accept this, but it has helped us a lot. For example, it told us that there is something like SWE API. It knew how to search for a certain character. It knew the actual part of the resulting JSON that contains the home world URL, and we had to nudge it a little bit, but it then was able to download that knew which part of the result and how to get the name of that, all of this without us having to open Google or going to the swap.dev and read the documentation. Okay, so now that you have a pretty good overview of what GitHub Copilot can do, let's see how it can help us in Unity. This is a brand new Unity project. All I did was I added a cube in the middle of it, and I've created a script called rotator, which is an empty script, and obviously it should rotate the cube, right? And that's what we expect it to do because it's called rotator. So now I'm opening up the script in Rider, and you can see that this is an empty script, but Rider already knows that it's kind of a Unity thing because it's a mono behavior, it has start and update and all the other stuff. So if I just ask, well, what would you do here? It instantly creates this one line here, transform.rotate 45 degrees time delta time. So if I go back here, wait until things recompile and hit play, then you can see that the cube indeed is rotating. Okay, let me get rid of this cube and do something a little bit more involved. So I'm going to create a game object called placeholder, and I'm going to create a new script here, and the script is going to be called sine wave. So what I wanted to do is to have a number of objects and put them in a sine wave on the screen. So again, brand new C# script, there's nothing here, but we can do stuff like public game object prefab. So that's going to be the thing that we need to put there multiple times. I'm going to have a private void create sine wave, which is going to, oh, it already offered quite a few things here. That looks pretty legit. So we're creating a sine wave with a given amplitude, frequency, phase, offset. I wouldn't even have put in the phase and offset. And it's going to instantiate this prefab and the specified x and y coordinates, as z is 0. It's going to instantiate this prefab at the x and y that we have calculated earlier. Right, and that's pretty much it. So now we have to invoke it. Let's say create, I'm just going to say create sine wave, and already did something there. I have no idea how this is going to look, but we're going to go over here and we're going to add the sine wave here, and I have to create a prefab. So we're back to the placeholder. I've grabbed the prefab there, delete this capsule and just press play. So what do we have here? Okay, that's pretty much exactly what we wanted. So I think Copilot so far passed the test with flying colors. We can of course do stuff like public float, and note that we have the frequency here, but because the Copilot only knows as much as it sees up until the cursor, it has no idea that we have frequency, but now it does. So frequency is now a publicly settable thing. Public float, amplitude, yep. Phase, yep. Offset, yes. Okay. One thing that's missing here is that everything is under the root So it's not under the placeholder. So I'm gonna instruct it just a little bit. Put the prefab under the placeholder. So it's not gonna know how to do that because the prefab is already gone. I'm just gonna say created object equals, and now it knows that how to do that. If I run that, every object I created is under the placeholder. And the reason this is important is because I want to do something more complicated, which is if frequency is changed, that's pretty good. That's exactly what we want, but not just for frequency. So I write here the comment frequency, amplitude, phase or offset is changed, update the sine wave. So let's see what it does. Well, that's not how you do changed. The way you do changed is basically store these things in private variable float lost frequency, and then now it picks up what I want to do and creates the variables for the others. So that's great. So let's see what we have here. See, if loss frequency is not frequency, amplitude is not amplitude, phase is not phase, offset is not offset, then it's going to create a sine wave, which is perfect, but we have to delete the previous one. So I'm just going to change this update to delete and recreate. So now I've explicitly told it to delete the sine wave. And let it think. So first it destroys the first item. That's not good. We have to destroy every single one. So we used to have multiple possible solutions here, but in this update of Copilot it's somewhat broken. So I'm gonna be even more specific, and see it says delete all children. Okay, and then we're gonna create a sine wave, and instead of finishing up, yes, we need to store all of those. Okay, let's see how this works. And as I move it, you see, it recreates this sine wave. Every one of these works as it should. Okay, for this last part of this session, I'm gonna do something that I've never tried before. This is gonna be a small HoloLens application with a sword, and I've never done it. I have no idea how much GitHub Copilot is gonna help us or not. So let's see. The idea is that you can grab the sword at the handle or at the sheath, and then the sword will move with your hand. But if you grab it with both hands, then you can actually open the sword. So again, I've never done this. I'm gonna skip certain parts because you're not here to learn about Unity, you're here to learn about GitHub Copilot, but I'm gonna show you the interesting parts of the actual Copilot interaction. So excited, let's get into it. First, this is the same Unity application that you saw before. I created a new scene for this, and I've imported these absolutely beautiful Evil Spirit Katana from the asset store. It's gorgeous and it's free. I've added the Mixed Reality Toolkit, which, as you know, is the key SDK that you use to develop HoloLens applications. I've added Mixed Reality Toolkit to this project. I've added this katana to the project. It's absolutely gorgeous. Just look at all the detail, amazing. And hopefully we're gonna see it and interact with it in HoloLens fairly soon. So I also wrote a short specification of what I want this little app to do, and this is the kind of thing that I would have written to a colleague of mine if I asked him to do the same task at work. So here is the specification, and we'll start with the beginning. I'm gonna start copying and pasting the documentation that I have. So when the app starts, a sword appears at a distance in front of the user, gently floating up and down. So this is all we have right now. So let's see. Sword can be moved by user by tilting the device. That would be a good idea, but this is a HoloLens app. This is a HoloLens app created with MRTK. Okay. So just give it a little context. I'm gonna say public. Okay, we have a lot of stuff here. Public class sword mono behavior. I'm gonna take all of this and copy it here without actually reading it, so that we keep the class name. And let's see, public class sword controller. Okay, so we have a speed and amplitude of frequency. That's nice. Position offset, temporal position. So that looks nice. Let's see what we have. I start the app, and it's moving up and down. It's not moving gently at all. That's fine. We're just gonna reduce the amplitude to be something like 0.05 or even less, just very small movements. Speed is fine. It's interesting that we have a speed, which doesn't seem to affect anything, and a frequency. Okay, so let's make it slower. Okay, that's perfect. So we have the gentle floating. It is working very well so far. Let's add the next part of the specification. So the sword is made up of two parts, handle and the sheath. The blade is ignored as it is secured to the handle. So we don't care about the blade. I just don't want to confuse anybody. We have the handle and the sheath. Do need collider. So I'm just gonna say public collider, and then it now knows that we need a sword handle. So we have a sword handle collider, which is, this time it was the rider that helped us. And then we immediately have the sheath collider, which is what we would want. So that's perfect. Okay, so the sword is made up of two parts. That's fine. The scroll is controlled by the user's hand. That's pretty close to what I want. So it can be rotated by the user, so it can be raised and lowered. Okay, so it's going all over the place. It was interesting to see. We're going to use my actual specification here, which says the following. If the user grabs the handle with his right hand, the entire sword snaps to his fist and moves until the hand is opened. So now we're getting to a more complicated territory. What we want to do is want to use MRTK's hand. So I'm going to give it a couple of hints. Private void, and I'm going to say is hand grabbing, and it's actually not a void, it's a bool. So I don't know by head how to decide whether a hand is grabbing something, but it seems like GitHub Copilot has an idea, but hand joint utils, so it went to hand joint utils, which is perfect, but it doesn't seem to have an is hand grabbing. Hand joint utils, we have a hand pose utils, So it's interesting. GitHub Copilot didn't know about hand pose utils, but I guess that is something that we could use.
Spoiler alert, it was not.
So for this one, Copilot didn't really help us. There, and I'm just going to say neither, and it it finishes. If neither the handle or the sheet are grabbed, move the sword back to its original position. Almost. We don't want to move it. Gently flow the sword up and down. Yes, it learned that from the spec. So how do you do that? Let's see. If neither of them are true, okay, it continues. So if neither of them are true, then we're going to grab it up and down. That's perfect. If the handle is grabbed, move the sword to the user's hand. It moves to the thumbed position. Perfect. Sheet is grabbed, move the sword to the left user's hand. So that seems to be working. That seems to be pretty cool. Okay. Okay. Let's see how it works. We have an error. Okay, so here we have the gently floating katana, and I'm gonna use my virtual right hand, which is set to be grabbing, and move it. I can grab it and move it around, and the floating stops as soon as I grab it. Yay. Whew, that was not so easy. So AI is changing everything, but will it change us, developers? Let's see what we've learned. First, what was it that GitHub Copilot couldn't really help us with? What are the cons? Well, it won't tell you if you're doing something wrong. If I had a pair programmer right next to me, he or she would probably have stopped me from doing some of the stupid things I did, which, let's be honest, every single developer does. Also, it wasn't able to refactor my existing code. Even with a junior developer, I would be able to tell them to do it a different way, do it some other way. Copilot can suggest you a couple of ways to do stuff, but if one of those ways are not how you want it to do, then you have to start typing and then hope that Copilot is going to pick up on what you're doing. You also can't ask it to do a complete refactor of a class or even several classes. It also won't really add features to your existing code. What I mean by that is it can add a new method just fine, but if you have an existing method and you want to add a new feature to it, then probably what you're going to have to do is add to the comments, add a couple of parameters, and just regenerate the entire method from scratch. For XR developers, it won't even help with the Unity part. It won't be able to go to Unity, add a couple of objects to the scene or move them around, and the same goes for other developers like WPF developers or any kind of UI developers. It can write the code, it can help with the code, but it won't be able to help with the editor and UI part for you. What's probably most important is that let me get out of the way, it can't invent new ideas and new approaches. It's not gonna come up with a brilliant idea. it may seem like it's coming up with a brilliant idea because it may have some representation of that idea somewhere on the internet. It's not gonna come up with anything brand new and original, which is, fine. Just let's be aware. And lastly, it struggles with less popular libraries. We have used MRTK, which is the most popular library, but in a very niche area, which is mixed reality development. And even there, it's fairly niche because it's mostly aimed at HoloLens developers. Just to be fair, GitHub Copilot is not even supposed to be great at C#, and we did find that it helped us a lot with general C# problems. So let's see what we could actually use it for. It could give us decent boilerplate code, especially if something is fairly well known, like, printing numbers from 1 to 100, or even doing stuff like using the Star Wars API. So that was pretty cool. It also could save us a ton of repetitive typing. It can very well pick up of what you were writing, and if you have a piece of code where you have to do the same stuff to a number of different objects or different elements of an array, then it can help with that and saves a lot of typing. So that's awesome. It also saves you a lot of Googling because remember, we didn't have to go to the Star Wars API description, and we didn't have to see the documentation or even learn that it even exists. Copilot already had the knowledge that this existed and could point us to the right direction. And it also saved us a lot of Stack Overflowing. So that's great. It also changes the way you write code. It actually makes you a better developer because it only works if your code is readable, if you have a lot of comments, if you name your methods and variables so that they actually reflect what you want them to do. Then Copilot can read those little textual descriptions and suggest sometimes amazingly intelligent results. It can also teach you stuff you don't know. So for example, if you want to get into Python and image processing, there's a lot of stuff on the internet that Copilot has digested and can get you on your way. So after all this, do I think that GitHub Copilot and similar AI tools will replace us as developers and XR developers? Do you think so? Let's ask our magic sword.
Wow, very impressive talk with all the special effects here. So yeah, hi Andres.
Hey,
Unfortunately, we're really short on time, but this is actually blown me away how much you can already do. I've heard about this code completion things, but it's really working pretty decently. And yeah, we don't have too much time, but I'm not so familiar with this Copilot. Like, I could imagine, like, if you have like different versions for like whatever the GitHub Copilot could be retrained to work for Unity, especially, right? And then it should already pick up a lot of these things.
yeah, we as mere mortals don't really have the possibility to retrain it to MRTK or even your internal library or the way your internal app works. So I think because this is such a huge neural network model, and even just to run it, 170 billion parameters, even just to run it, you won't be able to run it on your own PC. So you can't train this guy for your specific needs, but there are other AI approaches which run offline and on your computer, have somewhat different capabilities, and you can train those with your own application.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I can also imagine that like there will be some new developments, maybe that will make that more efficient, because this approach is maybe probably a bit of an overkill. Like this GPT-3 is maybe not even necessary for code completion. So we actually have a question here by Bertel. Yeah, well, if, so what's your conclusion? Will you continue to use it in real life coding
Yeah.
after this experience? Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely will. I'm the kind of lazy developer who is, uh, gotten where I am because I'm so lazy. And any tooling, any kind of productivity improvement, which I think, even at this very early stage, these tools can give you, is something that I welcome with open arms.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Like, it feels a bit like when you were googling for some functions, you're trying to like rename like the function to get like a different output. That's the same thing I do with like when I try to find out how to write that function. I also try out different ways to describe what I want to do, and so this is just like, this is not even like that new of an idea when you're coding. It's just a more direct integration into your IDE, basically. So, although, okay, it does work very different. Like when you're Stack Overflowing, you are more looking for the human way to ask questions, and this is like described like something for a documentation. So, yeah, I totally agree with
Yeah,
your
I have
conclusion.
started the advent of code, with especially this year with GitHub Copilot, and see how far it can take me. So I've only taken the first two puzzles, but so far it has given me 90% correct solutions for both of those. So if you go to my Twitter, you can see, my tweets about this over there. So yeah, I think it's not a full, co-developer or something like that. At least not at this stage. That's why I finished it with not yet. But but as it is, it already can be very valuable. And I try to do this talk in a way to explain how it works, so that people watching can form a good idea of what it's good for and what it's not so good for.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. We had a few more questions. I'm not sure how much time we have, but yeah, that's, I think, issue just how, because you need to train the model. Yeah, I think I can show the question quickly. Ludovic asked about licensed code. Yeah, the companies would need to retrain the machine learning on their own code if they want to give it to their own developers. Maybe that will happen in the future. Why not?
Yeah, probably in the future you will be able to train something like this, but it's not possible just yet, unless you're as big a company as Microsoft or some others. As for licensed code, so it has been trained on public domain codes. I don't know the exact license, but I do know that uh, they've been careful to only use publicly available code, but still I can see how a company who's very, very strict about code licensing and even doesn't allow open source code to be copied into their own code base, they may be a bit scared to use this thing. But so far we're just using it for fun and trying to figure out whether we can use it in our day-to-day work. And I think we can, but I see that there are some other people or companies who may not be so open to that.
Indeed, yeah. Well, it's definitely a huge step, like just to see this proof that it can actually help you and save time. And the one last question is if you will host your code on GitHub. I think he's talking about this sword demo, or I'm not sure.
Oh, the sword demo. I mean, I can put it on GitHub. It's not that great, and to be honest, it gave me exactly or almost exactly what I thought it would. I was hoping for better, but it couldn't figure out stuff like how do I detect when the fist is closed, and it didn't help me too much in that. But if you saw the other samples, those are also real samples. It could help a lot with that. So it's kind of a two-edged sword.
Yeah, all right, indeed. Yeah, okay, we're already over time. I've got to close this session. But yeah, I've been really impressed with the progress, and I think it will definitely make the coding easier and faster. The developers will always be needed for the creative part. I think that will never really go away. You need to think about what you want the code to actually do. But it will definitely make us get our work done faster and make development cheaper, maybe.
Yeah, the thing is, it is also saving you from reinventing the wheel. So if it's not gonna invent brand new ways to do stuff, but if it has seen a way to do stuff, even if in a different programming language, then it may be able to translate that to your thing. And I think that's pretty powerful by itself.
All right. Then again, thanks, Andres, for this introduction into the GPT-3 coding developments. And have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.